Hey guys, so we are going to be going ahead and we are going to be talking about your Unit 1 test, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go through the problems with you guys, and I'm going to make sure that we all understand what we are going to be going ahead and doing for our unit test. So I'm going to take some time and go through the study guide with you, and we will go ahead and we'll get this done. So first thing, we're going to be going ahead and we're going to be reading this graph. We are going to say, according to the graph above, describe the relationship between wolves and deer. Right, so again, for this stuff, we are looking directly at the data. We're not trying to go ahead and trying to come up with something on our own, right? We want to make sure that we understand what the data is saying. So in this case, right, we are going ahead and we're going to look at our population of wolves and our population of deer. So we have our deer on this side and our wolves on this side. And you will see that my deer is represented by my blue line and my wolves is represented by my red line. So there are a couple of things that you guys can say. First thing we can go through is the amount, right? There is a higher amount of deer than wolves. And that's just overall, right? So that is kind of what you guys see overall, is that there is just a higher amount there. The next thing is that when deers increase, right? So we have our deers that increase here. Our wolves increase a few years later, right? So wolves increase after deer. So we kind of see that happens on there. So those are kind of things. And then after we go ahead and we see that when wolves increase, right, deers decrease. Right, so when wolves go ahead and the wolves go up, right, deer go ahead and they go down, right? And this is because we have a predator-prey relationship, right? Predator-prey relationship, right? So in a predator-prey relationship, we're always going to see those things, that we have a higher amount of prey than we do predator. And the predators, if there's an increase, right, it will always happen afterwards, right? So it's asking you, when did the deer population reach its peak and when did the wolf population reach its peak? So in this case, we are looking at the 2 points that I've already circled, right? And we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the year, right? So we have 1975 for wolves. And then we have, what do we have? We have 1973 for deer. Oopsies. 1973, we have our deer. Right. It's asking us, when did the deer population see its most drastic decline, which means the greatest decline. So drastic means greatest. And when did the wolf population see its greatest decline? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to be looking at these years that are all in here, right? So that is when we saw our greatest decline, like it was just going straight down, right? So we're going ahead and we're looking at that. So for our deer, it's about from 1973 to 1978. Right? And then for our wolves, we go ahead and we look at that, and we have 1975 to 1978. 1975 to 78. So clearly 78 was a bad year for both of them. Okay, so predict what could have caused each of the populations to decline. Right? So again, here we're just talking about density independent and density dependent factors, right? So anything that has to do with density independent and then density dependent. It can fall in either of those categories. So it's density dependent resources like food. So if the resources like food or water decreased, right, then we had a density dependent deal that happened. if we ran out of space, so no more space. If there was disease. Right. All of these things are density dependent. Those are kind of things that could have caused that. Right, density independent, that is going to be our natural disasters. So anything like that, those are things that could have happened, right? Maybe the deer got sick, or maybe the deer ran out of grass. Anything like that could be something that kind of works through that. Okay, so it says go ahead, and we're looking at this aquatic food web, and we're going to answer the questions 5 through 9 just based off of that food web. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to start with focusing on one food chain and within the food web, and we're going to describe how the energy moves from plankton, which is this thing, right, to my seal, which is this thing. So they just kind of give us our start and end points, right? So from plankton energy is going to go into the penguin. I'm going to pick the penguin because I like penguins. Right? And then the penguin energy goes to the seal. Right? So I see this, right? So this is going to go into there. Right? And again, right, the arrows mean energy. Right? So arrows mean energy. Right? So that is why I'm saying that. The other answer that you could say is the plankton energy goes into the krill, right? And then the krill goes into the seal. So you'll see that you have my plankton that also goes into the krill as well. Okay. So it says, which of the organisms in the food web represents the greatest amount of stored energy? Right? So when we're going ahead and when we're looking at that, we're looking at what is at the bottom of the food web. Right? So it's usually whatever is on the bottom of the food web. So in this case, right, we have our plankton, and it is because plankton are producers. And you have to remember that producers are always going to be at the bottom of the food web, right? And they're the ones that support the amount of energy for the whole ecosystem. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to use our vocab, and we're going to identify each of our things on here as a producer, primary, secondary, or tertiary. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to start off with our plankton, which we already know. So our plankton is going to be our producer, right? And that is because it's on the bottom. Then the next one is going to be our primary. So the primaries, we're going to be looking at what eats plankton. So our primary, in this case, we got two things that eat plankton. We have our penguins, and we have our krill, right? And those are the two things that eat plankton, right? So then we go ahead and we go up into there, and we go ahead and we look at our next thing, right? So now we're going to go into our secondary. So now we're looking for where does the energy to the penguin go and where does the energy to the krill go. So the penguin can also go ahead and go into the seal. So we have our seal that's definitely there. The penguin, and there's no more arrows for penguin. Okay, so then I have my krill. My krill can go many different directions. I get my seal, squid, seagull, and whale. Whale. So those are all one on there. Okay, guys. So as I was going through number 7, which is each of the planktons and primary, secondary, and tertiary producers. So we listed plankton as our producer because that is the thing at the bottom of our food web. Then we have our penguin and krill that go ahead and that eat our producers, which is our plankton. Then we go ahead and we go into that and we see what eats the krill, and whatever eats the penguin or the krill is going to be our secondary, right? So I had that. And then we are going to go ahead and we're going to see if anything eats the squid, seagull, or whale. So I'm going ahead and I'm looking at that. And I have a couple of tertiary consumers, right? So then I'm going to write tertiary, right? And in this case, I am going to have where my squid and seagull energy goes. So my squid is kind of in the middle over here, right? My squid can get eaten by my seal, my seagull, or my penguin. So I have my seal, my seagull, or penguin. And again, what you guys will notice is depending on what food chain you're following, you guys will see that you can fit one more than one category, and that's okay. If you fit more than one category, it happens, right? And it shouldn't be something that you guys are kind of worried about. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to use a different vocabulary to go ahead and to describe what we see, right? So now we have 3 different categories. Now we have herbivores, we have omnivores, and we have carnivores. So if you guys do not remember, right, these are our plant eaters. These omnivores eat both, right? And then carnivores eat meat. Right, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to divide the animals that we see based off of those categories on there. Right, so herbivores. So herbivores are typically primary consumers. Right, so in this case, this is going to be our penguin and krill, according to what we have, right? And I'm just going in order, right? Omnivore, so we have to look at our thing and we have to see if somebody eats both. So if we go ahead and if we look at this carefully, right, that we see that we eat both. And the only one that eats both right there is going to be our penguin, right? So our penguin actually does not going to fall under a herbivore, right? Even though it does eat plants, it actually falls under a better category of omnivore. Right, because it eats both the squid and it eats the plankton. So that kind of makes it that omnivore. Now the rest of our animals are all carnivores because none of them go ahead and none of them go back and eat the plankton. Right, so you would have to be somebody that eats plankton and another meat in order to go ahead and in order to be an omnivore. So everybody else is going to fall under here. So that will be our, let's go ahead and let me double check. That'll be our seal, seagull, whale. What else? I'm missing one. Squid. Right. All of those things are meat eaters and meat eaters only. Okay. So next one, it says, considering the 10% rule, how much energy would the squid receive from the krill if the plankton has 62,527 units of stored energy? Right, so we have plankton, right, and then we are going to squid, krill. Okay, so we have to double check this. So plankton, krill, squid. Okay, so plankton, and then we are going to have our krill, and I'm going to have my squid. So this is my food chain, right? So this is the food chain that I'm working with, right? And at the bottom of the food chain is 62527, right? Joules of energy, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and I have to use my 10% rule. And basically what happens in the 10% rule is that each time I'm going ahead and I'm going to be moving my decimal point, right? So I'm going to be moving my decimal point over each time I go ahead and go up the food chain. So for example, right, I have 62527. I write the same number, but now I'm going ahead and I'm going to move that decimal once, and I'm going to put my decimal point right on there, right? So that's exactly what I did. I went ahead and moved it once, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about my squid energy, which is what I'm solving for in this case, right? So I go ahead and I look at this, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move my decimal point one more time, right? So 62527. Now I'm going to move my decimal point right on there, and that would be my energy that my squid receives. Oh, shoot, I deleted the decimal point. My bad. Of energy in krill. Right, so that would be the amount of energy in krill, and that's what the squid would go ahead and receive. Okay, next thing, carrying capacity. So carrying capacity is super important. It is the amount that the environment can hold. Okay, so what I mean by this is that in every ecosystem, no matter where you are, there's always like a max amount of animals that you can hold, right? So your carrying capacity is the absolute max, right? Before pretty much your species starts to die like drastically, right? So any amount that the environment can hold like successfully with like a steady rate of like births and deaths will go ahead and be your carrying capacity. So the key thing is that it's a steady rate of birth/death. Right, so you want to keep like the births and deaths are in check, right, and not one of them is like overshooting the other. Okay, on the graph to the left, what is the carrying capacity and how you know? Right, so on this graph, what I'm looking for in carrying capacity is where the graph levels out. So that is what you're going to go ahead and look for, where graph levels out. Right, so this is where we hit the max that the environment can hold. Right, so then I go ahead and I see where it starts, right, and where it finishes, and I can say day 23 to 35, right, I hit that carrying capacity. Okay, so what type of growth, logistic or exponential, is displayed on the graph above? So you have to remember that we have two types of graphs. We have our J-shaped graph, and we have our S-shaped graph, right? This is going ahead, and this is going to be exponential, and this continues to grow and grow and grow, right? And then this one right here is logistic, and this is the one that we have above, right? And we know because of the shape. So because of that graph shape, we know what types of graphs they are. Okay. So looking at this, right, benefits that animals have for going ahead and living in groups, right? First of all is protection. Right, so if you live in groups, you're innately brought in protection, right? Next thing is that you have our sharing of resources, right? So that would be our main two on here. This one, mainly not to share, right? If you're living alone, you're not sharing, so that's kind of good, right? And then also, you are able to go ahead and you're able to survive. Right, so you're able